The name he forgot, a man who built a fortune by controlling every number, believed he could control the truth, too. He was wrong. Before this story ends, a pregnant woman will turn one overlooked detail from the company's earliest days into the key that exposes an affair, millions of dollars in hidden transfers, and the cost of treating loyalty like weakness. Stay with us, because the final choice she makes is not about revenge. It is about the kind of life she wants her son to inherit. And if you believe quiet courage can be stronger than wealth, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what you would have done in her place. The envelope arrived at 9:17 on a cold Monday morning. Nathaniel Brooks was standing at the windows of his Manhattan office, 43 floors above Park Avenue, speaking to 3 directors about the largest acquisition in Brooks Capital's history. At 38, he had the polished confidence of a man who had spent years hearing yes. His navy suit was cut perfectly. His voice was calm. Even the city below seemed arranged for his convenience. His assistant appeared at the conference room door. "Mr. Brooks, a process server is asking for you." Nathaniel did not turn. "Send him to legal. He says the documents must be delivered personally." A few directors exchanged glances. Nathaniel disliked interruptions, especially ones he had not approved. He stepped into the corridor, signed the acknowledgement without reading it, and accepted a thick ivory packet. The first page carried an index number from the Supreme Court of the State of New York. Summons with notice. Action for divorce. Plaintiff, Eleanor Ashford Brooks. Attached behind it were the notices required in a matrimonial action, including the automatic orders that restricted both spouses from transferring, concealing, or disposing of marital property outside ordinary business and household expenses. Nathaniel read the first line twice. Then he laughed. It was not a joyful sound. It was the reflex of a man whose mind had rejected information before his pride could understand it. "This is theater," he said. His general counsel, Rebecca Sloan, took the papers from him and read quickly. Her expression tightened. "It has been filed," she said. "You have been properly served. Then make it disappear." "I can respond to it." "I cannot make it disappear." His private phone began vibrating. Vanessa Hart's name flashed across the screen. He silenced it. A second call came from the chief financial officer, then the head of compliance, then an outside auditor. Rebecca looked toward the conference room where the acquisition documents waited. "Nathaniel, until we understand the scope of the automatic orders, you should not move personal holdings or change ownership interests connected to marital assets. Ordinary company operations are different, but anything unusual will be examined." He stared at her. "You think my wife arranged this?" Rebecca lowered her voice. "I think your wife has counsel." Across Manhattan, Eleanor Ashford sat in a quiet conference room beside her attorney, Daniel Harrison. 7 months pregnant, she wore a soft gray dress and no wedding ring. One hand rested over her son as he shifted beneath her ribs. Daniel checked the time, then closed his notebook. He should have been served by now. Eleanor looked through the rain-streaked window. She did not smile. 3 months earlier, she had still been trying to save the marriage. Back then, the nursery walls were unfinished, the crib remained in its box, and Nathaniel still knew exactly how to sound sincere when he promised he would be home for dinner. On the morning everything changed, Eleanor stood in their kitchen making cinnamon rolls from her grandmother's recipe. She was 4 months pregnant and had spent the previous night assembling a pale blue rocking chair by herself. Nathaniel came downstairs at 7:30, dressed for work and reading messages on his phone. "I made coffee," she said. He took the mug without looking up. "Thank you. I thought we could finish the nursery tonight." "Tonight may be difficult." "You said that yesterday." The Chicago investors changed their schedule. Eleanor held out a small gift box. Inside was a silver watch she had ordered after their ultrasound. The engraving on the back read, "Daddy's time begins soon." Nathaniel's face softened for one brief second. "It's beautiful. So you'll be home?" He kissed her forehead. "Before dinner." The front door closed behind him. At noon, Eleanor drove to Brooks Capital with the watch because Nathaniel had left it on the kitchen island. The receptionist greeted her warmly, then looked confused. "Mr. Brooks left for an off-site meeting about an hour ago." "With the Chicago group?" "I'm not sure." Eleanor placed the gift on his assistant's desk and returned to her car. As she started the engine, a calendar alert appeared on her phone. Years earlier, Nathaniel had linked their family calendar to his travel account so she could plan around his schedule. He had apparently forgotten. Maison Lumiere. Table for two. 1 p.m. The restaurant was not near the downtown hotel where the investors were staying. Eleanor told herself there were reasonable explanations. A client had changed locations. An assistant had used the wrong calendar. Pregnancy had made her anxious. Still, she drove toward the Hudson. She parked across the street just as Nathaniel's black Bentley stopped at the entrance. He stepped out first. Vanessa Hart followed. Eleanor knew Vanessa as an external branding consultant who appeared at company galas in expensive dresses and spoke as though every room had been waiting for her. That afternoon she wore cream, and Nathaniel placed a hand at the small of her back as they walked inside. Vanessa turned toward him, laughing. He leaned close to answer. It was not the gesture alone that broke Eleanor's certainty. It was his face. Nathaniel looked relaxed, open, almost young. It was the expression he once wore when he and Eleanor ate takeout on the floor of their first apartment and planned a company they could barely afford to register. Eleanor remained across the street while rain began to darken her coat. The baby moved. She placed both hands over the small curve of her stomach and breathed until the shaking stopped. She did not enter the restaurant. She did not call Nathaniel. She did not confront Vanessa beneath the cameras at the door. Instead, she opened the Notes app and typed one sentence. Today I stop protecting the explanation and start protecting the truth. The next morning, she introduced herself to Daniel Harrison as Eleanor Ashford. Daniel was a gray-haired matrimonial attorney known for being patient until patience stopped being useful. He listened as she described the missed dinners, the calendar reservation, and the way Nathaniel had lied while holding a gift meant for their child. When she finished, he asked, "Are you here because you want to punish him or because you want to understand your legal position?" "I want to know what is real." "That is the right answer," Daniel said. "But we will find it lawfully. No passwords that are not yours. No secret recordings where the law prohibits them. No breaking into accounts. We use records you are entitled to review, public information, voluntary witnesses, and formal discovery if a case is filed." Eleanor nodded. Daniel asked about the company. "Did Brooks Capital exist before the marriage?" "Barely," she said. Nathaniel had a name, a borrowed office, and 3 investors who had not yet signed. "Did you contribute?" "I helped." "How?" She almost said, "The way wives help." Then she remembered the nights more clearly. "I designed the first investor deck. I kept the books when we could not afford an accountant. I built the client ledger. I sold jewelry my grandmother left me so Nathaniel could cover payroll. I negotiated our first office lease because the landlord trusted me more than him." Daniel's expression changed. "Do you have records of those contributions?" "Old tax files. Emails. The original bookkeeping drive, maybe. I have not opened it in years." Preserve everything. Do not alter or delete anything. And do not underestimate what you built simply because no one put your name on the door. Within the week, Daniel introduced her to Marcus Donovan, a licensed private investigator and former NYPD detective, and Grace Chun, a forensic accountant. Marcus explained that he could document conduct in public places and review lawful databases. Grace would examine household tax returns, joint account statements, and business records Eleanor already possessed or later obtained through proper legal process. They did not promise revenge. They promised a reliable timeline. Marcus confirmed that Nathaniel and Vanessa had traveled together repeatedly. Some trips were disclosed as company events. Others were not. Hotel entrances and public appearances established a relationship that had begun at least 8 months earlier, before Eleanor learned she was pregnant. The discovery hurt, but it did not surprise her as much as she expected. Each fact replaced a question she had been carrying alone. Grace found the first financial irregularity in a set of joint tax documents stored in the Brooks home office. The returns showed income from entities Eleanor had never heard Nathaniel mention. That alone did not prove misconduct. Wealthy business owners often held complicated interests. Then Eleanor noticed a vendor name in an attached schedule. Blue Harbor Advisory. She stared at it long enough for Grace to ask what was wrong. "That phrase came from our first invoice system," Eleanor said. Blue Harbor was not a company. It was a test name. Years earlier, when she built Brooks Capital's bookkeeping template, she had created fictional clients to check formulas before entering real data. Blue Harbor Advisory had been one of them. The test account was supposed to be deleted before the system went live. Grace leaned closer. "Are you certain?" "I chose the name because my grandmother used to take me to Blue Harbor when I was a child." No one else knew why it was there. The schedule showed consulting payments made to a real entity, now using that name. Grace did not declare it fraud. She asked Eleanor to find the original drive. That evening, Eleanor entered the small home office Nathaniel rarely used. The oldest files were stored in a locked cabinet. She had the key because the cabinet had once belonged to her. Inside were photographs from the company's first year, lease agreements, payroll copies, and a silver external drive labeled Brooks Launch, Ellie Backup. She called Daniel before connecting it to anything. Under Grace's supervision, they made a forensic copy and preserved the original. The drive contained the early bookkeeping template, including the fake test vendors. Blue Harbor Advisory was clearly marked sample, do not post. More important, the template contained Eleanor's old coding structure. Outside vendors began with V. Internal transfers began with I. Blue Harbor's recent payments were coded I-17, even though company reports described them as outside consulting expenses. Grace spoke carefully. This is a lead, not a conclusion. But someone used an internal transfer code while presenting the recipient as an independent vendor. How much? Eleanor asked. In the documents currently available, just over $18 million. The room became very still. Daniel closed the folder. We do not accuse anyone publicly. We preserve the records, file the matrimonial case when you are ready, and seek formal financial disclosure. If later evidence suggests securities or tax violations, we refer it to the appropriate authorities. Eleanor looked down at her wedding ring. For 6 years, she had believed Nathaniel's greatest betrayal would be loving someone else. Now she wondered whether the affair had merely been the first door she happened to open. For the next 10 weeks, she lived 2 lives. In one, she attended prenatal appointments, chose a crib, answered polite questions from friends, and sat across from Nathaniel at dinners that felt increasingly like staged photographs. In the other, she rebuilt the history of a company she had helped create. She recorded dates. She preserved emails. She gathered receipts for the jewelry she sold and copies of the earliest investor materials bearing her edits. Grace mapped lawful records without guessing beyond them. Marcus documented Nathaniel's public movements without trespassing or accessing private accounts. Nathaniel continued lying because Eleanor had stopped rewarding lies with arguments. One Thursday evening, he called from what he said was Boston. I may stay through Sunday, he told her. The investors want more time. Eleanor already knew from a public charity announcement that Nathaniel and Vanessa were scheduled to attend a weekend event in Aspen. I hope the meetings go well, she said. He laughed. They always do. After the call, she wrote the date in her notebook. Not because the affair would determine whether New York granted a divorce. Daniel had explained that the legal case could proceed on irretrievable breakdown. She wrote it because repeated deception revealed behavior, and behavior mattered when trust, parenting, finances, and settlement decisions were considered. At 31 weeks, Eleanor signed the summons with notice. Her hand did not tremble. Daniel filed it with the New York County Clerk and arranged for personal service. The required notices accompanied the summons, including the automatic orders. Eleanor understood their limits. They did not shut down Brooks Capital. They did not freeze every corporate transaction. They required both spouses to preserve the marital estate and prohibited unusual transfers of covered property without consent or court authorization. The purpose is not to destroy the company, she told Daniel. The purpose is to stop anyone from moving the finish line while the court determines what exists, he replied. On Monday at 9:17, the papers reached Nathaniel. By noon, he had called Eleanor 11 times. She did not answer until Daniel was beside her. What have you done? Nathaniel demanded. I filed for divorce. You could have spoken to me. I did. For years. This is because of Vanessa? This is because I no longer trust the life you built around me. His voice sharpened. You have no idea what you are interfering with. Eleanor felt her son move beneath her palm. That may be the first honest thing you have said. She ended the call. At Brooks Capital, Nathaniel moved from anger to strategy. He told Rebecca Sloan that Eleanor was emotional, manipulated, and confused about complex finances. Rebecca did not respond to the insult. Her attorney has requested disclosure, she said. We will comply with court rules and preserve relevant documents. Nathaniel stared at her. You work for me. I represent the company. Those are not always the same thing. The distinction unsettled him more than the divorce papers. Formal discovery began. Daniel requested financial statements, ownership schedules, tax records, and documents relating to entities in which Nathaniel held an interest. A neutral business valuation expert was discussed. Grace prepared to compare whatever was produced with the historical materials Eleanor had preserved. 2 weeks later, a man named Richard Collins called Daniel's office. Richard had worked in Brooks Capital's accounting department for 11 years. He was 53, precise, and frightened enough to whisper even inside a closed conference room. "I saw Mrs. Brooks's name on a litigation hold," he said. "I remembered her." Eleanor sat across from him. "Have we met?" "Once. The first year. You corrected a payroll error that would have delayed everyone's checks." Richard looked toward Daniel. "I need to be clear. I am not asking anyone to hide documents. I have concerns about records I was instructed to approve. I want advice on reporting them lawfully." Daniel stopped him before he offered any company material. "You need independent counsel. I cannot represent both you and Eleanor. Do not remove records you are not legally entitled to take. Your lawyer can help you preserve information, respond to subpoenas, and contact regulators if appropriate." Richard nodded, almost relieved. Daniel referred him to a whistleblower attorney with no connection to the divorce case. 3 days later, Richard's attorney notified Daniel that information had been provided to federal authorities. Brooks Capital subsequently received a subpoena demanding preservation and production of specified records. The inquiry concerned representations made to investors, transfers involving Blue Harbor Advisory, and possible obstruction. Nathaniel convened an emergency board meeting. "Who talked?" he asked. No one answered. Grant Mercer, the company's chief operating officer, sat at the far end of the table. Grant had been with Nathaniel for 9 years and treated loyalty as a private religion. He oversaw vendors, security, and difficult problems no one wanted described in email. Rebecca placed the subpoena on the table. "No documents are to be destroyed, altered, backdated, or moved outside the preservation process," she said. "No employee is to be contacted about testimony except through counsel." After the meeting, Grant entered Nathaniel's office and closed the door. "Richard Collins is nervous," Grant said. Nathaniel looked toward the city. "He was always nervous. He may be the source." Nathaniel's answer was quiet. "Then make sure he understands the damage he is causing." Grant waited. "How?" Nathaniel turned. "I do not care how you calm him down. I care that this stops." It was the kind of sentence powerful men used when they wanted the benefit of an action without the burden of naming it. Grant understood it as permission. The first anonymous call reached Richard that night. No one threatened him directly. A man simply said, "People lose careers when they misunderstand what they saw." The next morning, a black SUV remained across from his apartment for nearly an hour. Marcus photographed it from a public sidewalk and traced the visible company marking to Sentinel Executive Protection, a security contractor used by Brooks Capital. Daniel immediately shared the information with Richard's attorney, who contacted the federal agents handling the subpoena. Eleanor was told not to travel alone. The recommendation angered her, not because she doubted the risk, but because Nathaniel's choices had invaded another part of her life. "I will not spend the last weeks of my pregnancy hiding," she said. "You are not hiding," Marcus replied. "You are reducing opportunities for someone else to make a bad decision." That evening, Richard Collins failed to arrive at a scheduled meeting with his attorney. His phone went unanswered. His apartment lights were on. His wallet and keys remained on the kitchen counter. In the parking garage, Marcus found the broken cap of the fountain pen Richard carried everywhere. Security footage showed Richard entering a black Sentinel SUV at 6:42 p.m. The footage did not show a struggle. That made the situation no less alarming. Federal agents and local police began searching. Daniel moved Eleanor temporarily to a secure apartment arranged through her family, not because anyone had established an immediate threat against her, but because the same Sentinel vehicle had been observed near her obstetrician's office 2 days earlier. At 2 in the morning, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with Marcus and Daniel. "Did Nathaniel take him?" she asked. "We do not know," Daniel said. "Would he?" Neither man answered quickly enough. Eleanor looked down at her son moving beneath her sweater. For months, she had measured Nathaniel's wrongdoing in lies and dollars. Now another human being might have paid for speaking. Her fear hardened into clarity. "Send the original Blue Harbor discovery to the federal agents through Grace and Richard's attorney," she said. Everything we can lawfully provide. Daniel studied her. That may become public eventually. I know. It may reduce the value of the company. I know. It may also reduce the marital estate. Eleanor met his eyes. I did not leave one kind of dishonesty to profit from another. The following afternoon, Richard called his attorney from a motel in Pennsylvania. He was alive. The truth was complicated. A Sentinel employee had approached him outside his apartment and said Brooks Capital had learned of threats against him. The driver claimed he was taking Richard to a safe meeting with company counsel. Richard entered voluntarily, believing the company might finally protect him. Instead, the men drove west, took his phone, and pressured him to sign a statement saying he had misunderstood the Blue Harbor records. No one struck him. No weapon was shown. But the message was unmistakable. Cooperate, remain quiet, and his pension would be protected. At a highway gas station, Richard asked to use the restroom and slipped out through a service door. A truck driver gave him a ride to a motel, where fear kept him silent until he saw a news report saying authorities were searching for him. Federal agents placed him in temporary protective custody while prosecutors evaluated the danger and the value of his testimony. He was not instantly given a new identity, and no one promised that he would enter the witness security program. He was simply moved to a secure location while the investigation continued. Within days, 2 Sentinel employees were questioned. One provided messages from Grant Mercer. Grant was placed on leave. The board hired independent counsel. Nathaniel insisted he had never ordered anyone to detain Richard. Technically, that was true. Then investigators recovered the message Grant had sent after leaving Nathaniel's office. NB says calm him down. Do whatever is necessary. No more surprises. Nathaniel had not written the words, but he had created the instruction they described. When Rebecca confronted him, he blamed Grant. You told him to stop Richard, she said. I told him to manage an employee. You told him you did not care how. Nathaniel rose from his desk. Be careful. Rebecca remained seated. No, Nathaniel. You be careful. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. That night, Nathaniel asked Eleanor to meet him privately. Daniel advised against it. Marcus said the meeting should occur in a public place with security nearby. Eleanor agreed to those conditions. They chose the garden terrace of a country club where Nathaniel had proposed 9 years earlier. The club was nearly empty in winter. Bare branches moved above the stone path, and the fountain had been drained for the season. Nathaniel arrived first. He looked older than he had at the courthouse. Not broken, but no longer protected by certainty. Eleanor wore a camel-colored maternity coat. Marcus waited inside the building, visible through the glass. Nathaniel glanced toward him. You brought a guard. I brought a witness. He exhaled. You have made your point. My point was never the problem. The divorce, the subpoenas, the press. How much is enough? Eleanor stared at him. You still think this is something I am doing to you. You started digging. I found you with Vanessa. That was a mistake. No. A wrong restaurant reservation is a mistake. 8 months of hotel rooms is a decision. Nathaniel looked away. I ended it. Because you were caught. I am willing to come home. The cold air seemed to sharpen every word. You have not had a home with me for a long time, Eleanor said. You had a place where I waited. His face tightened. What do you want? Honest financial disclosure. A fair valuation of the marital interests. A safe parenting plan. And an end to the intimidation of witnesses. I did not take Richard Collins. You told a man who worships your approval to make the problem disappear. I never said that. You said you did not care how he handled it. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Who told you? It no longer matters who tells the truth. That is what you still do not understand. She removed a single sheet of paper from her bag. It was not a stolen ledger or a confidential government document. It was a copy of her original bookkeeping template, already produced through counsel, showing Blue Harbor Advisory marked as a sample vendor. I created this name, she said. You used it because you assumed no one remembered the beginning. Nathaniel looked at the page. For the first time, Eleanor saw fear without arrogance covering it. You do not understand those transfers, he said. Then explain them under oath. They were necessary. For whom? To keep the company competitive. You described internal transfers as consulting expenses. You think businesses survive by following every rule written by people who have never built anything? Eleanor almost laughed, but the sadness was stronger. I built something with you. Nathaniel shook his head. You helped with paperwork. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay your employees. I corrected the projections that won your first investor. I built the ledger you later used to hide money. You did not forget my contribution. You depended on me for getting it." His voice softened. "Ellie, if this company falls, thousands of people could be hurt. Then cooperate before more people are hurt. You could ask your lawyer to narrow the requests. You could tell the truth." He stepped closer, then stopped when he saw Marcus move behind the glass. "If I lose everything," Nathaniel said, "will that make you happy?" "No, then why keep going?" "Because happiness is not the same as surrender." A tear appeared in his eyes. Eleanor could not tell whether it came from regret, fear, or self-pity. "Our son deserves his father," she continued. "But he also deserves to learn that love does not require his mother to lie for one." Nathaniel looked at her stomach. "Will you forgive me? Maybe someday." Hope flickered across his face. "Forgiveness is not trust," she said, "and neither one erases consequences." She turned and walked toward the club. This time, she did not need to tell herself not to look back. There was nothing behind her she still needed to see. The Brooks Capital Board convened the following morning. Independent counsel presented the preliminary findings. Blue Harbor Advisory was controlled through layered entities by a longtime associate of Grant Mercer. More than $18 million had moved through it. Portions appeared to have been used to inflate expenses, conceal related party transactions, and shift money outside accounts visible in ordinary investor reports. The findings were not a final criminal judgment. The government investigation remained active, but the board did not need to wait for a conviction to decide whether Nathaniel could continue leading the firm. Rebecca displayed the message concerning Richard. Then Grace Chun, appearing by secure video with permission from counsel, explained the coding anomaly that Eleanor had identified. She did not speculate about guilt. She showed the records, the historical template, and the inconsistencies. Nathaniel listened in silence. One director asked, "Would we have found this without Mrs. Brooks?" The independent lawyer answered, "Not when we did." The vote was 7-2. Nathaniel was removed as chief executive officer and placed on administrative leave from all management duties. The board created a special committee, froze discretionary payments to connected entities, and committed to cooperate with investigators. Routine operations continued so employees and clients would not bear the immediate cost of leadership misconduct. When the meeting ended, Nathaniel remained alone at the table. For years he had described Brooks Capital as his empire. Now the company was protecting itself from him. The press reported the board's action that afternoon. Some stories treated Eleanor as a betrayed wife who had brought down a millionaire. That description was simple enough for a headline and wrong enough to bother her. She had not brought down a company. She had refused to help one man place himself above it. 2 weeks later, Eleanor went into labor. Daniel was in court when she called. Marcus was interviewing a witness. Neither man mattered in that moment. Eleanor's sister, Claire, drove her to the hospital while snow began falling over Manhattan. Labor lasted 14 hours. At 3:26 the next morning, Benjamin Ashford Brooks entered the world with dark hair, a furious cry, and both fists closed as if he had arrived prepared to negotiate. Eleanor laughed through tears when the nurse placed him against her chest. "Hello," she whispered. "You took your time." Nathaniel was permitted to visit later that day under arrangements made through counsel. He entered the hospital room without an assistant, attorney, or expensive coat. For once, he carried nothing that announced who he believed he was. Eleanor allowed him to hold Benjamin, while Claire remained nearby. Nathaniel looked down at his son. The baby opened one hand around his finger. Nathaniel's face folded. "I am sorry," he said. Eleanor did not ask whether he was speaking to her or the child. "I hope you become the father he needs," she replied. It was not reconciliation. It was a boundary with a door in it, one Nathaniel would have to earn the right to approach. The months that followed were quieter, but not easy. The divorce proceeded through financial disclosure, expert valuation, and negotiation. Nathaniel's ownership interests were assessed separately from ordinary company operations. Eleanor's documented contributions to the growth of Brooks Capital became part of the equitable distribution analysis. Her attorneys did not claim she owned every dollar the company had ever earned. They demonstrated that the value accumulated during the marriage had not been created by Nathaniel alone. The federal investigation continued on its own track. Grant Mercer was charged in connection with the pressure placed on Richard and later agreed to cooperate. Nathaniel's lawyers negotiated with prosecutors, while he denied authorizing any unlawful detention. Civil claims and regulatory proceedings remained unresolved for months. Vanessa Hart disappeared from Nathaniel's life before the first winter ended. When questioned, she admitted that Nathaniel had paid for personal travel through an account connected to Blue Harbor, but she said she knew nothing about investor reporting. Investigators treated her as a witness, not as the architect of the scheme. 11 months after the envelope was served, the divorce ended through a negotiated settlement. Nathaniel agreed after his attorneys warned that prolonging discovery would expose additional financial details and increase costs for everyone. Eleanor received a fair share of the marital estate, support for Benjamin, and recognition of her interest in the business value created during the marriage. Nathaniel received structured parenting time, beginning with supervised visits and expanding only if he remained consistent and complied with court-approved conditions. No one won a family case, but Eleanor left with her dignity, her safety, and enough independence to choose what came next. Richard remained under government protection during the most sensitive part of the investigation. He was not turned into a mysterious man with a new life overnight. He testified, met with prosecutors, and eventually relocated with assistance after authorities concluded the threats were credible. Before leaving New York, he sent Eleanor a note. "You remembered what the rest of us were trained to ignore." She placed it inside the notebook where she had written her first sentence outside Maison Lumiere. 1 year after Benjamin's birth, Eleanor sat with him on a bench beside the Hudson. He had learned to stand while holding furniture and had recently discovered that dropping a spoon repeatedly could control every adult in a room. Daniel approached with 2 coffees. "He has Nathaniel's confidence," he said. Eleanor smiled. "Then I will have to teach him responsibility." "How does freedom feel?" She considered the question. "Less dramatic than I expected." "That is usually a good sign." Nathaniel had continued visiting his son. Some weeks were awkward. Some were tender. He arrived on time. He learned how to warm a bottle, fasten a car seat, and sit on the floor without checking his phone. He had not repaired the marriage, and Eleanor no longer confused fatherhood with entitlement to her life. The criminal and regulatory cases had not yet reached a final ending. Brooks Capital survived under new leadership. Employees kept their jobs. Investors received corrected disclosures. Several disputed accounts remained frozen by government action, not by the divorce court. Nathaniel faced consequences that would be decided through evidence and due process, not by a dramatic headline. That distinction mattered to Eleanor. Truth did not require exaggeration. It required endurance. That evening, Eleanor carried Benjamin upstairs. In the nursery, the pale blue rocking chair stood beneath the window. She had once assembled it alone while waiting for Nathaniel to come home. Now Benjamin rested against her shoulder, heavy with sleep. She opened the old notebook. The first page still read, "Today I stop protecting the explanation and start protecting the truth." On the final page, she wrote a second sentence. "The truth did not give me my old life back. It gave me the courage to build a better one." She closed the notebook and listened to her son breathe. Nathaniel had believed control was the same as strength. Grant had believed loyalty meant obeying without conscience. Vanessa had believed attention could substitute for love. Eleanor had once believed patience required silence. Every one of them had been wrong. The empire did not collapse because a pregnant woman mailed an envelope. It changed because she recognized a name no one else remembered, preserved what she lawfully possessed, asked for help, and refused to trade the truth for comfort. Eleanor carried Benjamin to his crib and lowered him gently onto the mattress. His fingers held hers for another second before releasing. Outside, Manhattan glowed beneath the night sky, indifferent to ruined reputations and new beginnings. Eleanor turned off the lamp. She was not walking away from Nathaniel anymore. She had already walked beyond him, and the life waiting ahead did not need his permission.